What's going on, guys? ACP here, back with another GOAT format video for all the GOAT format fans looking for content. Before we dive into this real quick, I just want to say if you like this video and you want to see more GOAT format content on this channel, be sure you subscribe. I'm getting pretty close to 1,000, which is sort of a golden number for me. So I appreciate all of the support. So let's get into it. 2020 for GOAT format. I think the meta evolved probably more this year than it did in like any other year. So I want to sort of like summarize those trends and then talk about where I think the meta is going to be moving forward. So the biggest narrative for 2020, in my opinion, is this fight over Facedown Monsters. And we saw the meta evolve actually pretty rapidly, more rapidly than it does in most cases. But a lot of the players are definitely getting smarter about this stuff. So we saw the rise of these chaos decks that are playing a lot of cards like Dekoichi and Magician of Faith, and some players started saying, "Oh, well, maybe we can play Blade Knight." Blade Knight's a pretty good card, deals with those monsters, has potentially 2,000 tax, so it deals with some other monsters as well, like Air Knight Parshaft. So yeah, they're like, let's play some Blade Knights, attack all these face down monsters. And then the control players saw all these people playing Blade Knights, and we're sort of going, well, if all the aggro players playing Blade Knights, I'm going to play Gravekeeper Spy, because Gravekeeper Spy is a great wall against Blade Knight. Gravekeeper Spy has always been a pretty good anti-aggro card. I've been a Gravekeeper Spy fan for a while, but what's interesting is that the aggro players found a counter. They started saying, well, if the control players are trying to wall themselves with like Gravekeeper Spies and sort of other cards like Mystic Tomato, I could just play Mystic Swordsman level 2 and just crush any face down without caring about what it is. And I talked about this in another video, what a good meta call that was. So I'll drop a link to that. But yeah, that was, and now we're sort of at this point where the aggro decks are sort of playing a mix of both Blade Knight and Mystic Swordsman level 2, because Blade Knight's still good. And the control decks have been moving away towards playing like a ton of face downs. They're getting a little more careful about that. So I found this this sort of evolution here fascinating. I really did. I think it was pretty brilliant how quickly the RPS meta sort of advanced. So second trend is in 2020 we really did sort of start to see that GOAT control is not the best deck. Let's put it that way. I'd kind of been ragging on GOAT control for a long time. It's sort of become a meme. Oh, GOAT control is tier 2. Everyone's trying to beat GOAT control. What does GOAT control beat? They lose to aggro, they lose to chaos, they lose to combo, and I think that narrative really started to play out in real time. The last GOAT format championship we had, there were 0 GOAT control decks in the top 8, and it's just really hard. Like, GOAT control right now is kind of like caught between the meta. We've seen a lot more like sort of streamlined and linear decks, which I feel like in card games are usually like just the best decks. Like, some people say that like, oh, having a linear deck is like a bad thing. Like, usually it's a good thing, because it's better to just have one game plan and to be really good at executing it than to try to be like GOAT control and sort of like be having an identity crisis where it's like you're sort of a control deck, but like you sort of like also try to set up game shots. It's very weird. So with the rise of these chaos decks and with the rise of these aggro decks, GOAT control kind of got caught in the middle because it's very hard to beat both. We saw Everfall's GOAT control list, which was built pretty well to like beat aggro decks. It had like 3 Scapegoat, which is good against aggro. It had 2 creature swaps, which is good against aggro. It had 2 Gravekeeper Spies, which is good against aggro, and then it had 2 Mobius, which is good against aggro. So, like, Everfall's list was, like, very well-tuned to beat aggro, and some other decks like Angel Chaos, which sort of picked up in popularity for a while. But then if you build your deck like that, then, like, all these Chaos decks, you know, these Chaos decks play, like, all chainable back rows. They don't care about Mobius very much. You know, they don't really care about Scapegoat much. So, you know, then you kind of have a hard time there. So it's very hard to sort of build Goat Control to, like, have a solid matchup against everything. In a way, I feel like moving forward, Goat Control, you know, it's definitely, like, more of a tier 2 deck. I think if people are playing Goat Control, they'll kind of have to play it, like, almost like an anti-meta deck, where rather than just sort of have this, like, jack-of-all-trades Goat Control deck, you kind of have it sort of tuned towards one particular deck or another. And, you know, sort of moving forward with that narrative, and I'll talk about this a bit in the next slide, you know, in a way, I feel like these Thunder Dragon Chaos decks have sort of taken Goat Control's place in the meta. You know, for a while, Goat Control was sort of like the most popular deck. You know, you had Goat Control decks playing a lot of tech for themselves, like Abyss Soldier, and people would often say, oh yeah, you need to sort of, like, main to beat Goat Control and, like, kind of side against everything else, because, like, Goat Control was the meta. And now, like, Chaos decks are kind of like that, right? Like, you know, Thunder Dragon Chaos is clearly, like, the most popular deck. Anyone who's gone on Dueling Book, you know, can see it for themselves. And now people are sort of taking that attitude towards Chaos, right? They're sort of, like, maining for Chaos and then siding for everything else. So, you know, overall, I think Chaos Sorcerer is just a more powerful card than, like, Scapegoat plus meta. I think people sort of started to figure that out for themselves. And, you know, now, like I said, we see that Chaos has kind of taken Goat Control's place in the meta, and Goat Control is kind of more of, like, an underdog. So the third trend here, and again, this sort of goes along with sort of the narrative about Chaos taking Goat Control's place in the meta, is as Chaos decks sort of started to become more popular, they started maining cards to beat themselves. Or, you know, as some people call that, you know, becoming inbred, right? When you have a deck that's built to beat itself, that's sort of an inbred deck. And these sort of cards are the 3 that you see here on the screen. Dust Shoot, you know, very good against any deck playing Thunder Dragon. Kaiku, you know, very classic anti-chaos card. And then Mind Control to, you know, either take a chaos monster and banish itself, or take one of those flip effects that we were talking about before. So yeah, so like I said, you know, sort of towards the end of the Goat Control narrative, we saw Goat Control decks, like, playing cards like Abyss Soldier and Azura Priest to beat themselves. Then they were sort of dethroned by Chaos, and now Chaos is maining cards to beat itself, which sort of begs the question, you know, if Chaos, you know, sort of keeps focusing on itself too much and not paying enough respect to the rest of the meta, will Chaos be dethroned just the same way that Goat Control was? I mean, maybe, you know, we'll have to see. The other, you know, story of 2020 that I think people didn't really talk about is that, like, Mystic Tomato, like, quietly became this, like, good standard card. And prior to 2020, you really just didn't see too much Mystic Tomato, right? Like, you might have Chaos Recruiter decks that play, like, 3 Tomato, 3 Shining Angel, but, like, that was about it, right? That was about it. And now you see a lot of decks that play Mystic Tomato. You know, you have Chaos decks that play it. Those are sort of the main decks that play Mystic Tomato. And mainly the reason that they do that is because in a lot of these Chaos decks, Sinister Serpent is extremely powerful. So you want to have Tomato search Sangan so that you can get your Sinister as quickly as possible. You know, Tomato, of course, also thins your deck. And Chaos has, like, a lot of other different options for cards to grab. What we also saw is that some aggro decks actually also play Mystic Tomato, right? Here we saw a couple of Chaos Warrior decks play, like, 3 Mystic Tomato to get Sangan, Don's Lug, and New Doria. Chaos decks sometimes play New Doria to get with Mystic Tomato as well, just because, kind of solid, card deals with whatever. But sort of towards the end of 2020, what we started to see was, not only did these, quote unquote Chaos Turbo decks play Mystic Tomato, but we sort of saw like a new Chaos variant emerge, and that was Mimic Chaos. So something that I kind of let people in on was the fact that, hey, not only can Mystic Tomato search Sangan, but you can search Dark Mimic level 1 to either be a Metamorphosis target or just to level up to Mimic 3, draw 2 cards. So Mystic Tomato, yeah, it like kind of does everything. You didn't see too many people using Mystic Tomato to search Spirit Reaper, but that is, that's potentially another option. Something that you could do with Mystic Tomato. Just happened to be that most decks that wanted that kind of effect would just rather play Don Zalug. So yeah, so on to my predictions for 2021. And, I've already done a video about this. We'll link to it in the description. But my first prediction is that Return from the Different Dimension is going to be a very, very good card. Honestly, I've been playing GOAT format pretty much like ever since the revival became a thing, and Return from the Different Dimension has never been better than it is right now. And the reason why is because all of the cards that Return is good with, or good against, are super popular, and the main bane to Return from the Different Dimension's existence is Scapegoat, and Scapegoat usage is like at an all-time low. So again, I did talk about this. We see Chaos decks now maining like, and when I say Chaos decks, I don't mean Chaos Aggro. I mean like Chaos Control decks. Decks that are on the card advantage plan. We see these decks like main decking like 2 or 3 Kaikus, and Return really capitalizes on that. And of course, I also pointed out, if everyone's playing a lot of cards like Dakochi, all you got to do is just get one hit by a knock, and boom, you got 4,200 points of damage in your banish pile. Chaos Sorcerer, of course, is also popular. If you play Return, you're probably going to play Chaos Sorcerer in that deck. But, it's good against your opponents, right? Because, they play a Chaos Sorcerer, banish your guy, boom, now you got something that you can return. And if you're playing Chaos Sorcerer, Return is also pretty good against Mind Control, right? Because if they Mind Control your Chaos Sorcerer and banish it, well, now, like, all of a sudden, that's a card that you can bring back with Return. So, we've just got, like, all of these cards that make Return so good, and, like, people just, like, aren't, like, respecting it. They're just not playing the defensive options. Like, yeah, people are playing, like, Mirror Force and Torrential, but those are pretty easy to play around. You don't see too many people playing Scapegoat, and when they do, it's, like, often only 2. So, that, again, that's another card that you can play around. So, I'm not necessarily saying what the deck is going to look like. Honestly, like, I think Return is a good side deck card for Chaos Mirrors. I think you could even tech 1 for Chaos Mirrors. I think in a way it's better than a lot of the cards that people are, like, maining right now as a hedge against the Chaos Mirror. So yeah, I'm not saying, what the Return deck is going to look like, but I can tell you that Return has never been better than it is right now. So you should definitely try it out, main or side. So yeah, my second prediction, and this is perhaps not a very bold prediction, but Aggro is not going anywhere. I think Aggro is going to continue to be slept on. I think people aren't going to prepare for it enough. And I think Aggro is going to continue to top events. Yeah, as it turns out, Reinforcement Army is a pretty good card. There are a lot of great options. We saw Blade Knight, Don Zalug, Mystic Swordsman, Ninja Grandmaster, DD Warrior Lady, whatever, right? You got Don Zalug, which is a great anti-combo card. You got Mystic Swordsman level 2 and Blade Knight, which are great anti-control cards. And then you got Kaiku, which is, great against all the Chaos decks, and is a Dark yourself if you want to play Chaos Monsters. And of course, the classic aggro game plan of, dust shoot your opponent, beat them down, still perfectly valid. We still see people doing that. So again, I'm not necessarily saying I know exactly what the best aggro deck is going to look like in a year. I'm just saying that aggro is still going to be good. There's the old Magic player saying of there's no such thing as wrong threats, only wrong answers. And I think that kind of holds true. If you just want to play a deck that is going to be pretty decent against everything, I think aggro is a pretty good place to start. However, if you're looking for another safe choice, I think Mimic Chaos will be that safe choice. I think there's a lot of people that play GOAT format that just like kind of want to play like the solid control deck, and I think that really is Mimic Chaos. I don't think you need to make like too many adjustments. I think it's just like kind of solid against everything. Doesn't have like a ton of amazing counters. I also think it wins heads up versus like the other Thunder Dragon Chaos decks for a few reasons. Largely because like they're playing card destruction and not you, and that's not very good in the mirror. If they're maining like Mind Control, Mimic Chaos does very well against Mind Control. It's very risky to Mind Control a Mimic Chaos player's face downs. You also got like 2 Tsukiyomis to deal with all these Kaikus that people are main decking, right? So if, everyone else's strategy is, I'm just going to play a Chaos control deck with a bunch of main Kaikus, Mimic Chaos like does pretty well against that game plan, right? You got like Scapegoat, Sakuretsu Armor, Raigeki Break, whatever, to sort of stop the Kaiku from hitting you. You got meta to take the Kaiku. You just got like a lot of card advantage, and you just like kind of do well against everything. And I will say that, if my prediction holds up of Return from the Different Dimension gaining in popularity, Mimic Chaos has the Scapegoat to counter that, right? Also has Scapegoat to counter Reasoning Gate, because some people have been saying, hey, if no one's playing Scapegoat, I'm just going to OTK you. So, like, Mimic Chaos is definitely, like, a good control deck to play Scapegoat in. You also have pretty reasonable game plan against aggro, right? I mean, you got Chaos Monsters, you got metas, you got Sakuretsu armies, you got decent side options. I'm not saying that like Mimic Chaos beats aggro, because I think in game 1 it probably doesn't, but like you do well enough, right? You don't like have to, lose sleep over your aggro matchup. Also want to say, that I think Angel Chaos is still a valid choice. People do ask me about that. It has very similar advantages to Mimic Chaos in that, Angel Chaos does very well against Kaiku and Mind Control. One advantage that has in comparison to Mimic Chaos is Angel Chaos deals very well with Trap Dust Shoot. To the point where, like, Dust Shoot, I don't even think it's very good against Angel Chaos, whereas Mimic Chaos often doesn't deal with Dust Shoot very well. So yeah, it's like Angel Chaos, you got like Skilled Dark Magician to like run over Kaikus, run over 1600 attack Blade Knights, that sort of thing. So if aggro becomes very popular, then I think you could make the case for playing Angel Chaos instead of Mimic Chaos, because it has a better aggro matchup. And again, it's kind of safe. It does like kind of decent against everything. So those are my 3 predictions for 2021. As a bonus, I just want to say this isn't really like a prediction, but I think Combo and Goat Control are going to have a hard time in this meta and are going to need to do some soul searching. Reason Gate's kind of in an interesting spot because, like, on one hand, not a lot of people are playing Scapegoat, so, like, that's good for you. But on the other hand, you have people, like, maining, like, 2 and 3 Kaikus, so, like, that is not very good for Reason Gate. You definitely don't want to see that. Trap Dust Shoot also pretty popular in the main deck, which is pretty decent against Reasoning Gate. Even like Empty Jar and Library FTK, I of course am a fan of those decks, but I think they're definitely still good. Like they can definitely still win a tournament, but it's harder than it used to be. Even like Library FTK, if you look at these Thunder Dragon Chaos decks playing like 3 Raigeki Break, 3 Book of Moon, along with like sometimes main deck Trap Dust Shoot and like Ring Torrential, that's a lot for like Library FTK to have to like get through as far as back rows go. So it's definitely if everyone's playing like a bunch of Raigeki breaks, that makes it harder for those kinds of decks. And like I said, Goat Control's tier 2, so I think it'll really need to do some soul searching. It's gonna need to figure out its place in the meta. It's sort of going through an identity crisis. And I think there's some decent players who like Goat Control and will sort of find out, figure out the magic formula to win at least for a little while in certain metas. Personally, with the way things are so streamlined, I think the Dale Bolito style of Goat Control with like 3 main deck Solemn Judgments could be good. I don't necessarily know what the rest of the deck looks like, but seems good in theory, because like there's just so many powerful decks playing so many powerful cards that I think you need a strategy like that to succeed, right? Where you just sort of solemn all of their key power cards and then try to sort of just edge it out with sort of Goat Control's other tools, right? Just my theory. So yeah, that's all for today. Let me know in the comments whether you agree or disagree with these trends and predictions, and I'll see you guys later.